Now, on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
It's 7:07. It's O'Connor and Company. Starting your day here the right way in Washington, D.C. Thanks for tuning in to our morning extravaganza. Coming up at 8:05, Joe Concha will give us his take on the media news of the day. Also at 8:35, the Attorney General of Virginia, Jason Miyares, will get his assessment of his opponent coming up in this year's November election in Virginia. It's Larry O'Connor alongside Julie Gunlock. Sorry to see that you did not win any of the nominations yesterday, Julie.
It's fine. Good morning.
Party, but that just means 4 more years of you right here.
Yes. Angry me.
WMAL. Are you angry? You don't seem angry. You just seem
sometimes
engaged, let's call it. Joining us right now, Brent Sadler, Senior Research Fellow, Naval Warfare and Advanced Technology at the Allison Center for National Security at the Heritage Foundation. You guys have got to reduce the titles.
Yeah, no kidding.
Brent, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, you can just call me Brent.
All right, that works. So, not a whole lot now emerging, it appears, from President Trump's return from the G7, the meeting overnight with the National Security Council. He's put out a couple of statements on Truth Social, including all capital letters, 2 words, unconditional surrender, with an exclamation point in case you missed the emphasis. He also said we know exactly where the supreme leader is hiding. He's an easy target, but safe there. We're not going to take him out, at least not for now. What's going on here?
I think it's definitely a psychological play as well as a real tactical show of his hand a little bit, and that is trying to pressurize the leadership that's still surviving in Iran that the best way out of this conflict for them is to actually put down their arms and go to the negotiating table and give up permanently any hope of a nuclear weapons program. And that basically means unconditionally allowing in Israeli inspectors to then go in to all their sites and destroy completely all of their weapons. It's the surest way to destroy it. But the other way is you got to apply significant pressure to get to that point of the deal. And the Iranians have lost all their leverage.
Can you paint a picture for me as to what that might look like for them to agree to give up any hopes of a nuclear weapon and enriching uranium and full and open access for inspectors? How can this regime be trusted? This is a terrorist state. They've been so since the day they took control of that country and then took control of our embassy and took our hostages and began funding terrorists all around the region. How do you then trust them when they say we've abandoned any hope of a nuclear weapon?
Yes, I mean, that's why this is as extremely small odds and makes it very likely that until the leadership is either thrown out by the Iranian people, which is preferable, or they find religion and they change completely their position, which probably means the same thing. They're out of power by their own government, by their own supporters in the military, the IRGC specifically. So The odds are really small. There is no real clear path that goes back to Friday the 13th of last week or Thursday the 12th last week.
People, I think, are very curious, but also a little bit concerned about the U.S. sort of falling into nation building again. But what will be, in your opinion, an appropriate role of the U.S., sort of going forward in the rebuilding of Iran?
Yeah, we need to avoid nation building. We don't have a good track record on that. And at the end of the day, when it has been successful, it's really the people in the country. The post-war experiences in Japan and Germany are always held up. And the reality is there was democratic movements before World War II in both those countries, and we just allowed it to rise to the surface again and take control. Same with Iran. It's the Iranian people, those who don't like this theocratic dictatorship and this violent culture, death culture that's been preeminent there since 1979, have to enable and empower the Iranians to be able to take their country back. And that means standing out of the way, because it's not going to be a mirror image of American democracy or Western democracy. But at the end of the day, the only thing that really matters to us and should only matter is that Americans' interests and Americans' livelihoods are protected first and foremost. And so that also means in what the Israelis do. We can't allow a situation that continues to put Americans at risk and to threaten our livelihood into the future. And this Iranian regime is, at its core, seeking the destruction of the West and specifically Americans, and has lots of American blood on its hands.
So you're skipping ahead to regime change right now, and it seems like the decision at hand has to do with whether we cooperate or actually take an active role in eliminating the threat of the nuclear weapon. And do you believe that will then de facto lead to regime change, or is that step two in whatever participation we have here? And secondary question, does that match with what President Trump promised when he was running? He said he didn't want any needless, endless wars. I would argue this is not needless. It needs to be done, and presidents before him have wanted to get this done. This seems like the best opportunity to get it done. But it's that old line, you break it, you bought it. How do we participate in this so-called regime change, and what is our involvement from that point forward if, in fact, we help topple the regime? I threw a lot of questions out there, actually.
No. Well, I mean, at the end of the day, it's the nuclear weapons program in Iran that's the threat. So it has to be destroyed, and it cannot be allowed to be reconstituted. So that's the thing that has to be accomplished. How that happens, and the Israelis are doing it right now.
Do they have the capability to finish the job? That seems to be an open question. Do they have the armaments and the aircraft or missiles to be able to finish this last remaining, we're told, nuclear facility?
Yeah, there's a lot of talk about the GBU-57, very heavyweight, deep penetrating bomb. That's maybe necessary. It certainly has a lot more assurance that you can get down into like a facility like Fodor, which is built into the side of a mountain. But quite frankly, there's lots of ways to take out a deeply buried site. You can isolate, cut off all the vents and all the entrances, and everyone inside dies because they can't get out and they can't get air. Cutting off power. There's lots of ways to neutralize a site. So I would say the Israelis have the tools in which to neutralize, I'd say overwhelmingly, the Iranian nuclear enterprise. The problem is there's always going to be uncertainty until you're there to actually inspect the sites and review the records to know that you got everything. So an assault from the air is only so effective. So that's even true if the U.S. was involved. So better if the regime actually capitulates in unconditional surrender and gives it up and go to all the places where it's at. Lessons of Iraq come to mind on this as well.
I think the lessons of Iraq seem to be what's sort of looming over this entire discussion, especially those of us who are conservatives, Republicans, who were very much in favor, based on what we were told, of the intervention in Iraq. So that's why the questions need to be posed and confronted this time around. Can you stay with us, Brent Sadler? I don't know if you've got another interview, or are you good?
I'm good. I can stay.
WMAL, making sense of the news. Live from the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios. Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
Will the U.S. be involved or even take a lead in the final military strike that will end Iran's nuclear capabilities? That's one discussion that needs to be had. And I'm not a non-interventionist here, and I don't think that it's contrary to America First to take advantage of an opportunity right now where Iran is ripe for finally ending its nuclear program, whether it's voluntarily, unconditionally, with surrender, as the president has called for, or with this final strike or final series of strikes that are on the table. But then there's the second question, which I think needs to be discussed, which is if regime change is necessary to move forward in Iran, and I recognize that is necessary, what's our involvement? What does that regime look like necessarily? Who provides security? Is it American troops? Will somebody come in and fill the vacuum? Brent Sadler is with us from Heritage Foundation. Brent, you just said, the Iraq lesson. The Iraq lesson there was we toppled that regime, but then the vacuum got filled by, ironically, many Iranians. There's a lot of dead American soldiers and Marines because the Iranians got into that country and they wreaked havoc on our troops. No one wants that. So what's the next step here if, in fact, we do either assist the Israelis or take a lead with the Israelis in ending this nuclear program?
Yeah, I mean, stepping back and looking at a lot of history, Iraq, Afghanistan, and even going back to, previous wars the United States has been involved in, it's the nature of this regime that's in Tehran that's the danger. If it was a friendly regime, or if it wasn't closely aligned with the U.S. and they had a nuclear program, that we wouldn't be threatened. But it's the nature of the regime, so we have to be careful that what comes in next can't be as bad, or certainly have to avoid it being worse. So that's where America's interest is, and making very clear to the Iranian people and the regime, if it changes its colors, that it has to be move away from a violent posture to the United States and Americans. That's, I think, if you boil it down, that's the problem. How do you get there? Definitely avoid getting into and trying to micro-engage, in other words, be involved in the conflict directly in Iran proper. I don't think it's necessary. It won't be sustainable. Better to enable the forces in Iraq, the people, the trends that are in the right direction. We've seen protests, mass protest after mass protest.
Yeah.
The Iranian people clearly are dissatisfied. There is a fairly sizable proportion of the population that doesn't like this theocratic kind of religious death culture, and they do want to be more open to the West. Will they be a perfect match, align with our ideas and principles? No. But will they be a threat to the United States? That's an open question, and it's not clear who our allies would be in Iran yet, and that's the big risk. But going in there and kicking the dirt and rocks around is not a way to get to that.
Brent, one other secondary question that I think is worth asking, and that is we know Iran funds terrorists all around the world. You can trace them to Venezuela, to Cuba, to Hezbollah, to Hamas, to the Houthis, and we've had 4 years of open borders. We have no idea who entered this country over the last 4 years. Are they capable of having a group right now within our borders who will retaliate the moment the U.S. engages in a strike like this, where we could have Iranian retaliation not from Tehran but from Toledo?
Yeah, I think they already have been doing that. I mean, there's evidence that's been reported that elements aligned with, or even Iranian elements, have been fomenting a lot of the pro-Hamas protests. And there's been violence. There's been a lot of property damage. So I'd say they already are doing that. And you're right. We don't know who's here. There have been over 100, maybe 200 known agents and terrorists that have been stopped at the border. And so we have a sleeper cell threat in the United States. It's really the only tool left to the Iranians to attack outside of their borders, as their missile inventory is rapidly being degraded. So the pressure is going to be for this regime, if it wants to go the next level and escalate further, to use their sleeper cells, their overseas terror network.
Brent, I just want to really quickly go back to something you said just before about whether we know who our friends are in Iran, who could potentially take over, and whether that entity is friendly to America. Do we not know? I mean, I think about how long Iran has been under this theocracy, and 1979. I mean, it's a whole generation of people who've lived this way. Do we not sort of have intelligence on, within Iran, who is more friendly to the United States and Israel? And, I'm just trying to get a layout of who are the entities that might take over, and what their opinions are on Israel and the United States.
Yeah, when it comes to the Iran, there's a diaspora that's all over the globe. Some of them very active, but it's not clear if they speak for a plurality of Iranians back home in the country. Well, there's dissidents, and there's even violent terrorist groups that are fighting the regime in there. I'm not sure those groups would be necessarily a lot better than the current regime, but this is still a question. Until those groups are empowered or feel confident enough to start making their presence known on the global stage, it's going to be hard, no matter how much intelligence or insight or connection U.S. intelligence agencies may have with them. This is one of the lessons of Iraq. We thought we knew who those people were.
Yeah.
They were the wrong bets.
Brent Sadler, Heritage Foundation, thanks for joining us. Today, we didn't solve any of the problems and come up with the perfect solutions, but we're asking the questions that need to be asked right now. Thanks, Brent. It is 7:23.
Thank you.
Now on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
7:37 is not just a fine Boeing aircraft, but it's also the time on the clock at this very moment. Thanks for tuning in to O'Connor and Company. Coming up at 8:05, Joe Concha on the media, and at 8:35, Virginia Attorney General Jason Miyares will get his immediate impression of now the man he is going to be squaring off against after yesterday's primaries in the Commonwealth. It's Larry O'Connor here and Julie Gunlock there. Good morning, Julie.
Good morning.
I know how much you love The View.
Ugh.
It's just imagine watching a television show every single day that basically is populated by your worst neighbors. That's Julie Gunlock watching The View. Your neighbors with a New York accent, though. That's the
I mean, I think, honestly, The View was tolerable. For instance, when Meghan McCain was on there, because she did a full-throated defense of Republican principles every single time. And I might not have agreed with Meghan on every single point, but she had a point. She had a perspective, and it was generally a billion times more conservative than the rest of the panelists.
She
and
spoke for tens of millions of women
millions
who
of
were
women,
not represented
millions of
there.
and frankly, independents, not just conservatives, independents and women with common sense. Meghan was so brave. Also, she never shied away from a fight. And you know, there were poor Meghan, you know, when she was on that show, she would constantly get harassed by, you know, leftists, but also people on the right. Nobody ever sort of realized what it was like to be among the, you know, among
we
those
didn't
women.
appreciate her until we didn't have her.
We didn't right. And so then you have Alyssa Farrar now, and this is what makes me. I think she got Mary Griffin or something like that. Who cares? She is. It makes me so mad that some of the most outrageous, vulgar, disgusting things are said by these women on The View, and there's zero pushback now. Zero.
She made all of her money and got all of her stature and got all of her cred working in the Trump administration.
She's a total snake. But I will tell you, that's what makes this video so interesting, because you can never expect Alyssa to ever push back, but occasionally a guest will go on there. Yes. And fewer conservatives go on there, and thank God. I don't think they should, but occasionally a guest will go on there and say something reasonable or a little bit right of center, and it goes viral. And this latest is a great example of that.
Yes, let's hear it. It's Arnold Schwarzenegger. And what happened was they tried to sort of snake him into criticizing Trump and criticizing the current efforts at clamping down on illegal immigration. And they hit a whole lot of topics, but let's start first with what's going on in California. Cut 15.
If you were governor right now of California, how would you be handling the ongoing crisis that the state's facing?
Well, I think the most important thing is when you are in a leadership position like that is that you are inclusive and that you work together with everybody. Mm-hmm. And so it means that you have to work together with local government, the state government, and the federal government. They have to work together rather than fighting each other. Mm-hmm. Fighting each other's agendas and all of that stuff. That doesn't do good to anybody. And so that's number one. Number two, the most important thing is to create immigration reform. Because all of this is happening because we don't have immigration reform. For decades now, this country has needed immigration reform, which means that we recognize the fact there's people in the south of America that want to come north to work, and that we therefore should supply them with enough visas so they can come, because we need those workers. This is the bottom line, because then we would know who is here, we will be able to get rid of the criminal elements that are here and all of this stuff, so we wouldn't be in a mess that we're in right now.
All right. So despite the trite talking point that we need immigration reform and that we need to, we're letting in close to 1 million legal immigrants a year right now. There are plenty of guest farm workers for people coming in from Latin America to work agriculture, to work whether they're seasonal, and then they overstay their welcome. They overstay their. Right now, 1.2 million immigrants received green cards last year. So when you say there's so many people, we need to fix it. Okay, how many? What's the number? That said, you heard him say local law enforcement should be working together with federal law enforcement.
Yep.
That triggered Joy Behar. Take a listen.
But you were governor already. I was. You can't do it again.
I was. I'm not governor anymore.
But you are. But as an immigrant yourself, you are an immigrant. You're an immigrant in this country. Yeah. Did you have a visceral reaction to what they're doing, what ICE is doing, when you see the videos of it?
Well, I tell you, you said that the immigrant. I'm so proud and happy that I was embraced by the American people like that. I mean, imagine I came over here with the age of 21, with absolutely nothing. And then to create a career like that. I mean, in no other country in the world could you do that. Yeah. Every single thing, if it's my bodybuilding career, if it's my acting career, becoming governor, the beautiful family that I've created, all of this is because of America.
That's true.
And so this is why I'm so happy to see firsthand that this is the greatest country in the world, and this is the land of opportunity.
Okay, fine, but then what about the point here? Because Joy wants him to go off on the ICE raid. Oh. How dare you do this? Because those immigrants are just like me.
That's
but
right.
Arnold doesn't go there.
And really quickly, if you look really closely, Joy does begin to break out in hives. But go on.
Here you go.
I just think the world of the great kind of a history that we have with immigrants in America. But the key thing also is at the same time that we got to do things legal. That is the important thing, So we got to do things legal. And those people that are doing illegal things in America and that are foreigners, they are not smart. Because when you come to America, you're a guest. And you have to behave like a guest. Like when I go to someone's house and I'm a guest, then I will do everything I can. Keep things clean and to make my bed and to do everything that is the right thing to do, rather than committing a crime or being abusive or something like that. So that doesn't really work in this country. So I think the important thing is when you become an immigrant, to think about, okay, I go to America because I want to use America for the great opportunities that America has in education, in jobs, creating a family, all of those kind of things. Then you have to think about, okay, if I get all of those things from America, then I have to give something back. You have a responsibility as an immigrant to give back to America and to pay back to America and to go and do something for your community for no money whatsoever. Give something back to after-school programs.
It was
Special Olympics or whatever it is.
Honestly, Julie, the mildest, most moderate rebuke of illegal immigration you will ever hear. And they were going insane.
And also on the video, I think we have another clip. I'll make this quick, but on the video, you can see Sunny Hostin and her little claw reaching, touching his arm, tapping him, trying to get him to shut up.
Right, so that they could come in and harangue him.
Yes.
And again, that was the mildest, most moderate sort of backdoor. I mean, it's like Romney would have said, all right, come on. Step it up a little here, Arnold. But even that was too much for that table. Even that was too much for ABC News.
Wednesday on the Derek Hunter Show, President Trump put the Ayatollah on notice. We know where you are. Will we do anything about it? We'll talk about it at 3 o'clock on WMAL.
President Trump, of course, after the shootings in Minnesota that left a lawmaker and her husband dead and 2 more in the hospital, put out a statement asking the Attorney General and the FBI to investigate the situation. In fact, federal charges now seem to be imminent on the suspect, and also condemned the violence. Such horrific violence will not be tolerated in the United States of America. God bless the great people of Minnesota. A truly great place. That's good stuff, right? Not enough, though. I love how they rewrite these rules. They make new rules that you must adhere to, and if you don't, you're a monster. Yep. The unbearable smugness of Caitlin Collins on Air Force One demanding that President Trump call Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota. The guy who's been calling Trump Hitler and that we should bully him and push him
Get
around.
Meaner.
calling ICE agents, Gestapo. Yeah, but you should call him, and if you don't call him, you're a monster. Well, here's how Trump responded.
Have you called the governor yet or been able to speak to any of them?
I don't really call him. He appointed this guy to the position. I think the governor of Minnesota is so whacked out. I'll not call him.
And here's the bottom line. Remember when President Trump was shot at?
Yeah.
Remember when a bullet whizzed past his skull, missing his brain by a fraction of a centimeter, and clipped his ear with blood pouring out when there was an assassination attempt against Donald Trump? Remember that?
Yeah.
Tim Walz never called President Trump, never made a public statement condemning that violence. In fact, he was on the campaign trail within days calling Trump a dictator, calling him a Nazi, saying that he was a threat to democracy.
Yeah.
But Trump has to call Tim Walz. And if he doesn't, he's violating the norms. Although, who made these norms? Who said that a president has to call a governor of a state when there's a violent act like this?
They've set towns on fire. They've tried to assassinate Kavanaugh. They have, how many more things? There's this list of things that the left has done, and Walz encourages it.
That's right.
Every chance he gets.
He are you kidding? It's his brand. It's what he.
It's absolutely his brand.
Yeah. We don't play these games anymore. We don't play that because Caitlin Collins says you must call the governor. Have you called the governor? And Trump says no, and then suddenly it becomes a 12-hour news cycle of all these people on cable news tutting that this is the problem with Trump, that he can't call the guy. No, where's the rule that he has to call the governor? We don't play this anymore. You don't set the rules. You don't create new standards that we must then adhere to. Enough. It's 7:53.